Stop the War Coalition convener and supporter of Freedom for Ocalan Campaign, Lindsey German. Thanks for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. So let's start with the issue of the chemical weapons. UN member states signed the Geneva Convention to prohibit the use of chemical weapons and to consider them as a war crimes. However, why does the United Nations remain silent about the chemical weapons used against the Kurds despite the claims and evidences on this issue?
Well, I think you've got to look. I mean, I think firstly, it's important to say chemical weapons should be banned everywhere. They are a barbaric form of weaponry, and there's absolutely no justification for using them because they obviously have the most terrible effects on the people being attacked by them. Having said that, if you look at the use of chemical weapons, there's a whole number of ways in which the Organisation for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the other organisations, there's a different emphasis on different countries and the way that they do so. So if you look, for example, at the question of the Kurds actually have suffered from chemical weapons, most notably historically with Saddam Hussein Halabja, and where he used chemical weapons. Now, this was used as a reason for overthrowing Saddam Hussein and evidence of his brutality and so on. We opposed the invasion of Iraq and the occupation of Iraq, but nonetheless, this was an argument that was put by the people who supported war. Now, when you think about the present situation, where the Kurds are under attack again, this time from Turkey, over the with the use of chemical weapons, we hear very, very little. There's nothing, as far as I can see, in the mainstream media about this. There's certainly no idea that Turkey should be in any way, we're not talking about regime change in Turkey. We're not talking about any threats to Turkey. And while I wouldn't necessarily be in favour of those, I do think that this approach, which turns a blind eye to what Turkey is doing, and of course, it's not just with chemical weapons; it's to do with the whole onslaught on the Kurds that we've seen in northern Iraq and elsewhere. You're talking about a situation where some chemical weapons are obviously regarded as worse than others. And in this situation, I think for reasons that we can perhaps understand, the Western governments in particular are very reluctant to attack Turkey or even to bring it to people's attention what Turkey is doing in the Kurdish regions.
Thank you. In front of the whole world, the Turkish state both carried that weapons to the ISIS gangs, and as you remember, in Rojava, and used these weapons in their attempt to invade northern Syria. What action can be taken against the Turkish state in the international arena?
Well, as you know, Stop the War, we're not in favour of intervention by the Americans, the British, and so on, even when we think the governments that we're talking about, in this case Turkey, have committed these sorts of crimes. I think we have to deal with it in a different kind of way. And the truth of the matter is, Turkey would not be able to deal with these, would not be able to do this with impunity if it wasn't for certain things which the Americans and the British absolutely defend. On one hand, you've got the refugee situation where Turkey is holding a whole number of refugees, stopping them going into the European Union, and Turkey is supported by the West in doing this. Turkey is also a member of NATO. It's a very, very important member of NATO. And in this sense, you're not going to see the various NATO powers doing anything but supporting Turkey. So I think we've got to look at the wider politics of it here, and the fact that the countries that Turkey is allied with may not like what they're doing in Kurdistan, but they're not going to do anything seriously to stop it. So I think a lot of this is going to have to depend on people like ourselves and how we actually try to organise and campaign and to bring this issue to the attention of much wider numbers of people, because I don't think we can rely on our governments. Well, we can't rely on our governments to do anything, but even if they did do something, they almost certainly wouldn't do the right thing, and they almost certainly would use this as a justification for more war rather than actually trying to bring peace to the region.
Kurdish fighters shared images of Turkish written ammonium nitrate containing bombs and photos showing wounds on bodies of various fighters and some dead bodies like burned. Isn't the use of ammonium nitrate illegal? Plus, a couple of days ago, Kurdish fighters again they shared some footage that showing some green smoke bombs are have been used. So nobody has any idea about what is that. As you are, we know you are not maybe chemical weapons expert, but you are good with the weapons deals and stop the war. So how would you evaluate this? What are these weapons? Isn't it illegal to use all these? How would you evaluate that?
They're totally illegal. They're totally illegal, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be used under any circumstances. And the fact that people have got evidence of these shows that obviously, almost certainly, this is a regular occurrence rather than just a one-off, which would be bad enough. Um, I think that when you look at the use of chemical weapons, again, this isn't new. The American forces used them in Fallujah in the early part of the invasion of Iraq, used depleted uranium, very widely used in Iraq. The Americans in Vietnam used Agent Orange. Um, and it seems to me that there are certain powers that are able to get away with this, even though there are all these agreements, there's all the lip service paid to um, the abolition of chemical weapons. We're very, very far from it being the case. And we know, I mean, I was up in Liverpool a few weeks ago campaigning against an arms fair in Liverpool, which is taking place this week. We know that these weapons are being sold. We know that the arms fairs, even though they don't obviously openly sell chemical weapons, are involved in a massive trade of military equipment and of arms of different sorts. And we know that chemical weapons are available to people. So it's a very, very frightening thing. And of course, there are times when these attacks hit the headlines. They have done in Syria. You know, in the civil war in Syria, we had actually an intervention from Britain. We stopped that in 2013, but we didn't stop it more recently, and that was supposedly in response to a chemical weapons attack. We've had the situation in Salisbury with the people who were with the Scripples who were attacked with chemical weapons, and again, this is seen as a major cause of tension and conflict with Russia. Okay, that's that seems to be all right, but when it comes to this kind of thing happening in Turkey, we hear absolutely nothing about it, as was true over Halabja with Saddam Hussein at the time. Very, very little was heard about it. It was only later, when they began to construct a case for war against Saddam Hussein, that this became headline news.
Yeah, as you said, when it happens to Turkey, we don't hear nothing from nowhere. Just to underline the first question, international forces entered in Iraq in 2003, as you remember, under the pretext of chemical weapons. Why don't the same international powers even take a step against the Turkish state use of chemicals today?
Well, I think the answer to that is that there are some countries that um, they regard as George Bush said at the time, the axis of evil, and countries which they see as their enemies, and there's other countries that they see as their allies. And I'm afraid that Turkey plays a very important role for them in the ways that I've outlined, and in other ways as well. It is a major military ally, a very important ally, very strategically placed in terms of between Europe and the Middle East. So that's very, very important for them. It also is policing the whole refugee crisis on behalf of the European Union. So I would have thought the chances of any of these governments seriously condemning this kind of action is very, very low. Plus the fact that the Kurds have now been demanding their own homeland, their own country for, well, 100 years, and they haven't had the response that they've required. I mean, this is still a major question in international politics.
Dear Lindsey German, Stop the War Coalition convener, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.